we're looking at a couple things at once. We're looking at ancient history. We're doing a quick overview of Bible passages that go alongside some world history, and we're also looking at creative ways people have solved problems throughout history. And so, as always, I like to share with you our plan. And so this is our rough overview for the 5 weeks we have together. Last week we did bricks, Egypt, and using the environment. This week we're going to do assault Assyria and angles. Next week we will do dreams, Babylon, and systems. I'm excited for that one. That's going to be fun too. Seas, Persia, and innovation will be week 4. And week 5, we're going to do either Greece or Rome. I'll see which one is more fun between now and then. So that is our current plan for the moment. And so let's recap quickly and kind of remember where we were last week and how we've gotten to this point. So if you remember, we're for our entire process, we are using a thought experiment of a settler drone that looks something like this. And we said that they're just like humans. They eat food. They need downtime. They have limited knowledge, but they're great learners. And we imagined that we use the settler drones to settle a new planet, which is right here. These are the planets in our solar system. And we discovered a new planet that is on the same orbit as Earth, but it's on the other side of the sun. So we've never seen it until today. And we sent our settler drones to go check it out and get it ready for us. And so last week, we sent our settler drones to the planet, and they began building a settlement there. And they used mud bricks to do it. And so we talked about the challenge with the mud bricks, that they're not perfect. They break sometimes. And so we worked with our settler drones. We worked on our groups, and we decided that the one thing they can do to strengthen their bricks is to add straw. Because adding straw is actually, it seems very simple, but it's kind of a complicated, the physics is kind of complicated and adds tensile strength to our bricks. And so they're able to withstand a lot more various kinds of pressure. And so we told our settler drones to create mud bricks with straw. And this was the territory they initially settled. They sent us a quick map of where they'd settled. They're right down here, sort of towards between the river and the sea is where they set up their capital. And they've really gotten to work, and they've shifted a little bit, and they've moved a little down here to sort of the bottom left of our map. And they've actually shifted their capital over here to the right here to this river. And things have gone pretty well for our settler drones as they to enhance their territory and fortify it. But if you remember, we talked last week and said that our settler drones had encountered a strange noise. They weren't sure what the noise was in the distance. And as they were trying to research and figure this out, they sent some teams to do recon, and they realized they ran into a problem. They couldn't record all of their findings. And so they actually came up with a bonus technology. They invented a new device to record their plans, their learning, their art, their writing, and their thoughts. So they're really proud of this new device, and they decided to use an acronym. It's hard to call it the plans, learning, art, writing, and thought device. So they just call it the plot device, which is a lot easier. So our drones have developed the plot device. And as they've been looking to find out what the sound was in the distance, they finally came face to face with the sound. The sound was made by evil drones. These evil drones, somebody else has sent drones to our planet. And these drones, the sound was these drones making bricks. They have stolen our technology and are making bricks just like our drones. And as we were discovering this, we also learned the hard way just how evil these drones are. These are villain drones, and they have stolen the plot device. And so our drones are in trouble because they don't have their plot device anymore, and they need to get it back. So as they've tried to figure out where the villain drones have taken the plot device, they finally found that the villain drones, with our brick recipe, they have built a castle. So the villain drones have a castle, and inside their castle, they are keeping our plot device. And we need to get our plot device back from the villain drones. So our drones have sent us a message, and they're a little intimidated by this fortress. They don't know how to get the plot device that's locked up inside. And so they would like for us to advise them on how to get the plot device out of that castle. So that's what we're going to think about today. How do we get the plot device back? It is locked up in the villain drone stronghold, and we have to tell our settler drones how they can get it out. So we're going to go back into breakout rooms, and in your groups, I want you to answer the question, how do we get the plot device? But remember, you have no internal combustion engines. You have no gunpowder. You can't use jets or bombs or bulldozers. There are no drills. You don't have power tools. You have to use primitive instruments only to get the plot device, which is being held by a sinister force inside a fortress. Another very important piece of information, the villain drones do not speak the same language as our settler drones. We don't know what language they speak. We don't know if they're coming from another country or another planet, but they don't speak the same language, and we don't have access to power tools. So how do we get what's inside the walls? So Rebecca is going to break us up into our breakout rooms again, and we'll give you 5 to 10 minutes to talk through how we're going to get the plot device, which is locked away in the villain drones fortress. So once you get your invitation, go ahead and into your breakout rooms, and we'll hear from you on the other side how you decided to get the plot device from inside the fortress. Nicely, or maybe not so nicely, or did you pick something completely different? How did you decide to get the plot device? And let us know in the polls. We got a couple votes coming in. All right, very nice. Got a decent little spread here. And so yeah, about 2/3 of us have voted. We'll wait for everybody to weigh in. All right, very good, very good. A couple more seconds for you. And 5 seconds. All right, so most of us have voted. So this is what we decided. Most of us said something else. We did have a number of us said we're going to go over the walls. We're going to find a way to get our little drones over the walls. Some of us decided we're going to tunnel under. Others said we're going to just find a way to break through. And some of us said we'll find a way to ask nicely. So let's boy, I wish I could ask each of your groups to tell us, but I want us to get out of here in time. So we're going to just we're going to go ahead and jump back into our lesson. So several of us, better stop sharing my poll results here. So several of us just joined. So just as a quick recap, we are in our study together. We are settling a new planet on the other side of the sun. It looks like this. We're sending these little robots. Last week, they made bricks. We told them to add straw to make it stronger. This is the territory they're settling on their planet. Our robots started writing things down on a plot device before it was stolen by the villain drones. And the villain drones have a fortress that looks like this. And this is where they're keeping the plot device. So in your groups, we talked about how to get the plot device back. With no internal combustion engine, no gunpowder. How do we get what's inside the walls? So while you were in your breakout rooms, I was flipping through a historical atlas, and I discovered again, there are some similarities between even this new territory and an ancient empire. If you turn it around and look at it upside down, the territory that our drones have settled looks suspiciously like the Assyrian Empire. And it just so happens that the ancient Assyrians had to solve the exact same problem as they were trying to conquer new territories. They had to figure out how to break into seriously fortified cities. And so I wanted to share with you what the Assyrians did. Now, we know what the Assyrians did, and we know exactly what the Assyrians did because they took pictures. not with cameras, but the Assyrians actually recorded everything they did in on reliefs. They sculpted all of their conquests and victories, and you can actually see them. They're in the British Museum. Tons and tons of sculptures and reliefs of Assyrian conquest, and it's all online. And you can actually virtually walk through the British Museum online if you'd like to look at these. But so this is a sketch of an Assyrian sculpture of one of their conquests, and this is actually a city that the Assyrians attacked. And when a city like this would see that the Assyrians were on the way, they got very scared, and they would immediately call out the defense forces. And so the defenders would head to the tops of the walls. They would send archers out, and they would, you can see lots of archers on the tops of the walls, and even shield bearers to do anything they could to get ready for the Assyrians, because when the Assyrians arrived, they came with something unlike anything our defenders had ever seen. When the Assyrians tried to assault a building or a city that was walled in like this, the Assyrians brought this. This is called a siege machine. I kid you not, historians call this a siege machine, and it's a combination of a scaffolding, a battering ram, and a tank. And they have no internal combustion engine, but you can see this guy right here's got his hand on a handle, and it was on wheels, and the soldiers would actually push this siege machine, and there's a battering ram sticking out of it. And so they would push it against the walls, and then they would pull it back and push it again and pull it back, and they'd come again, and they would just keep doing this until eventually the defenders found a way to try and stop the battering ram, and they would let down chains from the walls, chains, ropes, anything they could to grab onto the siege machine to stop it from battering into their walls. And so they would try to grab onto it to hold it in place. And they would also, you can see this guy over here, he's dumping something onto the siege machine. They would actually use oil or pitch and set it on fire and throw it onto the siege machine to try and set the Assyrian tanks on fire. But the Assyrians got wise to this, and you can see there are little spouts hanging out of the tank here, and they would actually pour water through these little funnels to put out the fires. And so the Assyrians knew what they were doing, and they also came up with a way to counteract the chains. They had special soldiers whose job it was to knock the chains off and set the battering ram free so it could once again go back to slamming into the side of the walls. So you might be tempted to think that the Assyrians just went straight through the walls, but it wasn't as simple as that. You see, while they were going smashing into the walls, they used their archers, and there was a body count. However, if they could get the siege machine close enough to the walls, they would send their soldiers to the top of the siege machine to jump across onto the top. So the battering ram would try to go through the walls. The soldiers would then climb the battering ram and try to go over the walls. And in other sculptures, we see them setting up ladders and building ramps. So they found as many ways to go over could. And while everyone, as you notice, is looking over here at the siege machine, there are a couple people looking the other direction, because while all this was going on in the front, the Assyrians had a special corps called the sappers. Some of you may be familiar with this term. The job of the sappers was to go around the other side and tunnel underneath the walls. So while everyone was focused over here on the battering ram, the Assyrians went around to the other side and tunneled underneath. So to get inside these fortified cities, the Assyrians actually went over, under, and through the walls. They went every way they could to get inside. And we know because they left us records like this. But there's a problem with this kind of three-way assault. It takes a lot of people, and inevitably, you're going to have some casualties on your side too. And so the Assyrians, they actually had one more way they liked to try and get into these fortified cities. And that's what we find recorded beautifully in the Bible. So as we look at this, look at this image. So the Assyrians would create images like this, and they loved to let people know that this is how they attacked their enemies. That there's no way you can protect yourself. They will come over, they will come through, they will come under, they will find a way into your city. And once that word began to spread, that alone became a really powerful weapon. And so the Assyrians began to sweep through city after city after city until they came to a very important little city called Jerusalem. And when they surrounded Jerusalem, the first thing they did was they, rather than trying over, under, or through, they employed their favorite weapon, which we find in First Kings, or sorry, Second Kings 18. Now, this is a family friendly program. I have to edit some of this. If you want to read the really nasty bits, you can read it yourself in Second Kings 18 after we're done. But it begins in the 14th year of the king Hezekiah. King Sennacherib of Assyria came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. And then there's a commander, the Rabshakeh, said to them, "Say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you base this confidence of yours? Do you think that mere words are strategy and power for war? On whom do you now rely that you have rebelled against me? See, you are relying now on Egypt, that broken reed of a staff which will pierce the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who rely on him." So what's happening here is they have surrounded Jerusalem, and they're trying to use some psychological warfare. They're saying to the Israelites, Egypt is the only other major world power, and they can't save you. And so they're going to continue. And they then say to the Rabshakeh, "Please speak to your servants in the Aramaic language, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in the language of Judah within the hearing of the people who are on the wall." But the Rabshakeh said to them, "Has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the people sitting on the wall who are doomed with you?" What we see happening here is the people, the defenders. Remember, we saw them at the top of the walls. They're shouting down to the Assyrian soldiers, "Please stop speaking to us in Hebrew, because everyone can hear you and you're upsetting the people in our town. Speak to us in your language. We understand your language. Stop speaking to us in our language." The Assyrians, when they assaulted a city, the first step was to learn the language of the people inside, because they wanted to terrify everyone inside the walls. And they spoke in the common language. So the Assyrians, our drones, the Assyrians would have first sent spies to learn the villain drones' language so that they could threaten the villain drones in their own language. And the story continues. And so the Assyrian officer says, "Do not let Hezekiah, king of Jerusalem, king of Israel, do not let Hezekiah make you rely on the Lord by saying, 'The Lord will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria.' Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from your own vine and your own fig tree, drink water from your own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive oil and honey, that you may live and not die. Do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying the Lord will deliver us." This is the Assyrians' favorite tactic to get into the walls. They want to terrify everyone on the other side of the walls so much that they will open the doors and let the soldiers come in. And remember, people know that this is the scene. And if they haven't seen some of the Assyrian artwork, the Rabshakeh will tell them. He describes in kind of gruesome detail what will happen if they don't just open the doors. The Assyrians say, "I'm coming into your town, and if you make me break through the walls, I'm going to come in cranky. You don't want me cranky. You won't like me cranky. Just open the doors. Come on out, surrender, come back as prisoners alive rather than making me come inside." And so this is the way the Assyrians liked to get into the walls. But before we go on and think about how this applies to solving problems, Let's hear what happened to the rest of the story. Some of you may remember this. This is not one of our favorite stories to teach, but it's really a powerful one. The people were silent and answered him not a word, for the king's command was, do not answer him. And we'll skip about 15 or 20 verses. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, who are enthroned above the cherubim, you are God. You alone of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. So Hezekiah, along with the prophet Isaiah, he gathers some prophets, he gathers some priests. Hezekiah tears his clothes, he sits in ashes, and he begins to pray prayers like this. So the city is surrounded, food cannot come in, food cannot go out, the people are stuck. Hezekiah prays. They've got the siege machines rolling up, getting in place for the morning. The sappers are setting up on the other end. Hezekiah prays at night, and this is what happened. That very night, the angel of the Lord set out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. When morning dawned, they were all dead bodies. Then King Sennacherib of Assyria left, went home, and lived at Nineveh. Now, let's stop here for just a quick moment. This is a fascinating and fantastic story, and it's one of those stories that, like, this is a hard story to grasp. The idea that 185,000 people in this camp just died overnight. And we see this in the Bible. We know that this is written from the viewpoint of Hezekiah and the people inside the walls. But like I told you, the Assyrians left their own records. And so it would be kind of interesting to see what the Assyrians said about this particular attack. And it turns out they actually left a record of what happened at Jerusalem. And you can read it. And so what the Assyrian record says is they actually go through city after city after city. I stopped at city number 1. I broke through the walls. I captured the people. I destroyed it. City number 2, broke through the walls, captured the people. I destroyed it. City number 3, broke through the walls, captured the people, destroyed it. City number 4, broke through the walls, captured the people, destroyed it. Got to Jerusalem, surrounded it. Went to the next city, broke through the walls, destroyed it. It's the strangest thing, but in the official propaganda of the Assyrian king, they acknowledge that something strange happened at Jerusalem and they could not get inside. And so Jerusalem survived the Assyrian siege, and the king ended up going back to Nineveh, and he lived in Nineveh. And let's take just a moment to think about that word Nineveh. Hopefully there is a Bible story that jumps out at you when you hear the word Nineveh. I'm seeing some nodding. Nineveh is a very prominent city in one particular Bible story. Nineveh is over here. And this is kind of a close-up of what Nineveh looks like. It's right there on the Tigris River. Nineveh is prominent in the story of Jonah. Jonah is living during the time of the Assyrian Empire. Remember what happens when the Assyrians come to town. Remember how bad the Assyrians are. And that's when the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But of course, Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid his fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. So just to put this in context for you, Nineveh is over here, Jerusalem is down here, and Jonah went this way. He got on a boat. You cannot get to Nineveh by boat. In this physical universe that we occupy, there is no road from Jerusalem to Nineveh by boat. So Jonah's going the opposite direction. And if you think back to what the Assyrians did, it makes pretty good sense. They were telling Jonah to go to the home of the siege machines and the sappers and tell them to stop being mean. Of course, Jonah was terrified. And of course, then we get the rest of the story where he goes anyway, and things actually work out, much to Jonah's frustration, where God ends up forgiving the Assyrians, which is kind of unusual. But again, I want us to remember what's happening in the Bible as we look at these things. We began with Egypt. We talked about Bible books like Genesis through First Kings and First Chronicles, characters that would have happened when Egypt was a major world power. But this week, for Assyria, if you want to think about what's happening in the Bible, Second Kings and Second Chronicles are the books that we find around the time of the Assyrian Empire, but also Isaiah and Jonah. These are prophets who are active. And here are some key Bible characters: Jonah, Isaiah, and Hezekiah during the time of the Assyrian Empire. So that's what's happening with Assyria. But let's think back to how they solved the problem. The Assyrians decided they were going to solve their problem by going over, under, by going through, and by staying outside and convincing people to come out themselves. So they met one problem with 4 different solutions. And as we're thinking about how we solve problems ourselves and all the various strange problems we've been confronted with over these last months and this past year, perhaps the way to solve some of these problems is not by finding the solution, but rather by finding solutions. If you think about all the different challenges we have to face, and let's just be open and honest with each other, we're all facing very strange problems. It's harder to sleep now than it was a year ago. It's harder to exercise. It's harder to have patience with our loved ones. It's harder to get socialization with people that we know and love. And a lot of us are trying to lose weight and get back in shape after eating differently than we're used to. These are all challenges we're facing. And as we keep striving to find a solution to these problems, maybe the best way is not to find a solution, but to find many solutions. So rather than approaching this issue, let's go with sleep. If you're having trouble getting to sleep at night, if you're worried about stress or work or the economy or politics, rather than saying what I'm going to do to help myself get to sleep is I'm going to turn off my phone earlier, or to say I'm going to cut out caffeine, or to say I'm going to exercise more, maybe one way to approach it is to try all of those at once. Let's shut down the phone earlier and cut out caffeine and try a little more exercise, and maybe even try something bizarre and see if something counterintuitive works. For example, trying to get what's inside the walls by staying outside doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the Assyrians found it was actually the most effective way to solve their problem. So as we're facing all these different challenges, let's over this next week, let's try to find a way we can come at our problems from multiple angles at the same time. Rather than finding a solution, let's find many solutions. And so as we go back to our thought experiment, let's go back to our settler drones. So I will communicate with our settler drones, and I will tell them to go over, under, and through the walls to get their plot device back. And I'm going to tell them to learn the other languages so they can communicate with these villain drones who were responsible for all those strange sounds as they were building fortresses. But I did get a message from our settler drones that they too have been having trouble sleeping lately. They said that they're having some strange dreams. And their signal cut out before I could hear what the strange dreams were. So we'll have to wait till next week to figure out what exactly those dreams are. But what is it that they're dreaming? And why do these dreams bother them? And are they, now that they have the plot device back, can they expand our territory in this new world? We will find out the answers to these and other questions next week. We visit our settler drones. So it is 7:04, so that is about the same time we finished last week. We are right around an hour. So before we wrap up, quickly, again, it's always awkward to do this over Zoom, but does anyone have any questions about what we covered tonight? You can raise a hand or just unmute yourself and shout it out. I'm not seeing anyone gesturing wildly in front of your cameras. So if you do have questions, and if there's something you're not comfortable sharing in front of the whole group, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to chat with you via email. But thank you so much for thanks for sticking with me through another bizarre journey into Earth 2 with our settler drones and the villain drones, and breaking in to rescue the plot device. And yeah, thanks for sticking on through that particular joke, because I mean, you all could have left when I made the plot device joke. So thank you.